I think one of the more important functions to work with in Excel is the VLOOKUP. I think the pivot tables is probably one of the more important commands to work with, but when it comes to functions, the VLOOKUP is something that you're going to use on a regular basis, no matter if you're in the medical field, business field, and so forth. So the key here, as we start looking, getting a good, looking at this function, is to get a good grasp of how this will work. Okay, so with this, VLOOKUP is just basically what you're doing is you're going to be looking up information in another table that might be stored on another spreadsheet, okay, and you're going to retrieve that data and place it into the existing table. That's all you're doing. And the key here is to understand how does this relate to certain projects or certain exercises that you might do for that purpose. So as we take a look here, I want to really get a good foundation of VLOOKUP and see how I can use it in some different examples. You can download the spreadsheet and go along with the steps if you need to. So here what I have is I have some information of a table that list of voters or volunteered on local elections. And so what I want to do is I want to, first of all, I want to basically determine their age. Okay, and we could look at date of birth and kind of figure it out, but I want to go in and use a formula to calculate age, so it's something that you might not be aware of how to do. And then I'm going to use a VLOOKUP, and what I want to do is I want to kind of create a segment based on age ranges. So over here on the right hand side I have a table that says, okay, if they're 18 or less, I mean, between 18 and 21, really what will happen is, they'll be be labeled as new. If they're 21 to 38, they'll be labeled as young. And so what I want to do is I want to put in certain segments based on these age ranges to help me figure out, if I can see, okay, it's a senior, it's a young person, and so forth. So that way I'm not just looking at the age itself. So the first thing I want to do is I want to calculate the actual age based on the date of birth, and I want to keep it updated. So every day it changes. I want to make sure that I have the current age. So this is where we're going to have to work with a formula. Now, one of the things I want to do here is I'm going to be using a couple functions that allows us to get that age. Okay, so as we always do, we always start with the equal sign, and with age itself, we never say we're 45 and a half years old. We always say we're 45 until we turn the next year. So we always basically round down. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the int function, and that int function is going to stand for integer. Basically, it's going to round down automatically. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another function inside the parentheses. It's called year frac, and basically, as it says here, it returns the year fraction representing the number of whole days between the start date and end date. So you have to know the start and end date. Basically the start date would be the birth date, and the end date is today for that purpose. And so I'm going to put in parentheses, it has two arguments basically. The start date, which in this case would be C2, and we're going to put in a comma, and we're going to use another function here. We're going to put in today, left and right parentheses. That automatically brings back the date today. So that way you don't, some people will go in and put in 2/17/2021, but the problem is what happens if it turns tomorrow? It's a different date. So that's where this function comes in play. I'm going to put in the extra parentheses to end the integer function. I'm going to press my enter key to return. Oops. And I have an extra typo in there. So I'm going to go ahead and correct that because I forgot to put the extra parentheses in. And you see it comes up as 42. And then I'm just going to use the autofill handle and drag straight down. And you can see the ages right there. You can format it differently and so forth. Now here comes our VLOOKUP. So I'm going to start off with the equal sign, and I'm going to tell it to Vlookup. Now you have to basically has three arguments we have to look at here. We have to tell it what to look up. We have to go to the other table that we're looking the information up on. In this case, it's over here with age, 18, new, and so forth. And then we basically have to indicate which column that we're going to look for in that case. So I'm going to go in. I'm going to look up D2. That's the age. I'm going to put my comma in. Now my range is going to be H2 through I5. We're not going to include the labels here. And in this case, we're also want to make sure that we're using absolute values for this purpose, because it's always going to go there. If we don't put the dollar signs in, then it's going to move relative to its position. Okay, so I'm going to put a comma in, and I'm going to look. I want to retrieve the information from the second column, and I'm going to say approximate match, which stands for true. Okay, and that's going to create that range aspect that we're looking for. So between 18 and 20, it's going to say new. 21 to 38 will say mature, and so forth. And put my parentheses in, and I'm going to press my enter key. Notice it comes up and says mature. So where's the age 42? It's between 39 and 60. Now I'm going to drag this straight down, and all of a sudden I have went in and made and got that legend, this extra table. I looked up that information and retrieved what I want. The key, what you have to do is know what you're looking up in the other table, which in this case was the age, and what do you want to retrieve from that table? What column? Okay, is it the first column? No, it's the second column in this case. And so it basically looks at this table and says, okay, it's going to retrieve that information. Okay, now let's take a look at another example that's on a different spreadsheet. Maybe you're filling out, these are the voters, and these codes relate to party codes, as you can see here. Are they libertarian? Are they democratic? Are they republican? And so what we want to do is we want to have it look at this table that's on a separate spreadsheet. And so again, we're going to put this information right here into this column. And so I'm going to go up here, I'm going to put in a heading, political party, and then I'm going to work with the Vlookup here. Now you can write it in. Now keep in mind, if you want to use a dialog box that you can work with, that's also fine as well. So we can go in and go into the formula section, and we can go to lookup reference, and we'll scroll down and we can choose Vlookup. Now what this difference here is, you get this little dialog box. So it might be easier for you to do it this way, or you can just physically write it out. So the first thing we have to do is look up what values. So I click on this arrow, I click on the passcode. I come back over, I click on the arrow to expand, it says it puts in C2. Now where is the table array? I click on the arrow, I come down to example 2. I'm not going to include the labels, so I'm going to start with A2. I'm going to scroll down and select the entire table. I'm going to come back over. It's going to tell me it's on a different spreadsheet. So when I click and go to a different spreadsheet, it basically indicates that for me. Now what I want to do is I want to know what column or index number that we're going to work with. You don't have to go in and press this arrow, you just type it in because you know it's the second column. And we want to find the exact match. So in this case we're going to do false. We're going to write out false. That's going to find the exact match. So when we say true, it's going to find that range. So false is what we want here. We click OK. finds Democratic, scroll down, use the autofill handle I should say. Now there's an issue here with not applicable. So what is wrong with that? Let's take a look. Now what's happening is, you remember last time when I talked about the ranges? When I copied this formula down, it changed the cell reference from A3 to B46. It should be A2 to B45. And what we have to do is we have to make the table absolute. If we don't, it changes relative to its position. So I did that on purpose to show you what happens if you don't make this absolute. So we're going to put the dollar signs in. Now you can put the dollar signs, they have to be before the row, they have to be before the column letter, row letter, and the number. Now if you wanted to, you can also click at the end of the cell reference and press function key F4, and that will put the dollar signs in. Now I'm going to press my return key to accept, and we use the autofill handle to drag back down, and now green is going to come up correctly.